I'm Dr. Adam Richards, and welcome to this week's edition of History Revived. This week we'll be talking about the 40th President of the United States, President Ronald Reagan. Now, you've come on a special week this week. We actually have a special guest speaker, Mr. Christian Lehman, who will be joining us this afternoon via the telephone to tell us a little bit more about the works of Mr. Ronald Reagan. Sounds like he's here. Good. All right, Mr. Lehman, can you give us a little bit more insight about the first term of President Reagan's presidency?
The Cold War. So during his first term, he was occupied with the Cold War almost the entire time. If you don't know what the Cold War is, it was America versus the Soviet Union.
Now, from my very basic understanding, the Soviet Union was pretty big, definitely in the race for a world superpower. How on earth did President Reagan protect the U.S. From such a dominant force at the time?
Mr. Reagan strategized weapons to keep the U.S. safe. In order to keep the U.S. safe, he put up defense initiatives against the Soviet Union attacks. He sent troops to invade Grenada to free the island from a Marxist dictator. This invasion was significant and caused the end of the Brezhnev Doctrine, as well as sparking numerous events that ended up leading to the Cold War.
It's very interesting. And if that did ultimately lead to the end of that conflict, the Cold War, what exactly happened in the Soviet side of things?
The sudden collapse of the Soviet Union began a new world. The events in between are not fully understood, but experts say that the Soviet Union was supposed to be an everlasting, strong empire. Ronald Reagan had brought that down and brought that to dismay. It was stated as unstoppable, indestructible, and it was stated as an unstoppable, indestructible adversary, but Reagan got rid of that and took down the Soviet Union single-handedly with the U.S.
That's definitely something to remember. That's a big deal. Very admirable of him, some might say. What else can you tell me about President Reagan's time in office?
He was also very admired in his presidency for having stated to make the government smaller in a way and lower taxes. He was praised.
That's very interesting. All right, Chris, here's a bit of a curveball for you. If you had to describe President Reagan, how would you do it and why?
He was described as a great leader, but great leaders come at a price. He was almost assassinated. He had a great response to his assassination, making sly remarks and joking comments.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of his first public things to be quoted after the shot was, "You just ruined my best suit." I could be wrong, but that's what I've heard.
After being shot in the chest, that was his response. He also hoped the doctors were Republicans.
What a guy. And what exactly did that show the American people?
This was significant because he had a great response, a great public response in almost getting assassinated, where people really took him seriously and really knew where his heart was.
I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. Now, before we wrap up, can you give me a brief timeline of some significant events that happened during Mr. Reagan's time in office, apart from the Cold War and being shot, obviously?
In 1981, 52 American hostages were held in Iran. Mr. Reagan claims he did not know about this because a lot of it was behind his back. It seemed suspicious, but turned out to be true. His crime charges were dropped. And again in 1981, He increased defense spending and decreased taxes. Then, later that year, he was shot right in the chest. Again, in 1981, he was negotiating with the Soviet Union for no missiles if the Soviet Union agreed to dismantle similar weapons already in place. 1983, the recession ended. 1983, later in the year, the invasion of Grenada. 1988, Reagan prohibits abortion assistance.
Chris, are you still there? Well, folks, seems like we've lost Dr. Lehman. Again, I'd like to thank him for being on the show. I hope he can hear me right now. President Reagan was definitely a character. Someone who's taken from us far too soon. And he's definitely one of the most remembered and then celebrated U.S. presidents. He didn't do too much well in office, but the things that he did do, he did right, and he's known for it. Again, thank you very much for joining us on this week's edition of History Revived. Next week, we'll be talking about, Next week, we'll be talking about Tom Cruise and the struggle of being short and making it big in Hollywood. Thank you. Good evening and good night.